The fluorescent lights of Innovate Solutions headquarters cast their familiar harsh glow across my corner office as I reviewed the latest prototype specifications. It was March 15, 2019, and after 8 years with the company, I had finally reached the position I'd always dreamed of, Senior Director of Product Development. My name was etched on a brass nameplate outside the office, and through the glass walls, I could see my team of 12 brilliant engineers working on what would become the most revolutionary piece of technology our industry had seen in decades. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. My name is David Rodriguez, and at 34, I had climbed the corporate ladder through a combination of relentless innovation, strategic thinking, and what some might call obsessive attention to detail. The product we were developing wasn't just another gadget, it was a breakthrough in wireless energy transmission that could fundamentally change how we powered everything from smartphones to electric vehicles. The technology was elegant in its simplicity but devastatingly complex in its execution, requiring years of research, hundreds of failed prototypes, and countless sleepless nights. The genesis of this innovation traced back to my graduate studies at MIT, where I had first theorized about resonant frequency optimization in electromagnetic fields. Most of my professors dismissed it as impractical, but Dr. Sarah Milhouse, my thesis advisor, saw something different. She encouraged me to pursue the research, even when other students mocked my late-night experiments in the basement laboratory. Those foundational years of ridicule and rejection had hardened my resolve and sharpened my focus. When Innovate Solutions recruited me straight out of graduate school, I brought nothing but potential and a head full of theories. The company, founded by tech veteran Robert Steinberg in 2005, had built its reputation on taking calculated risks with emerging technologies. Steinberg himself was a former Silicon Valley legend who had sold 2 previous startups for hundreds of millions before deciding to focus on technologies that could actually improve people's lives rather than just generate profit. My first project involved optimizing battery life for the company's flagship wireless charging pads. It was mundane work, but it gave me access to the company's extensive research facilities and, more importantly, the freedom to conduct my own experiments during off hours. I spent evenings and weekends in the lab, slowly building the foundation for what would eventually become my breakthrough patent. The early years were challenging. My immediate supervisor, Jennifer Walsh, was a brilliant engineer but had little patience for theoretical research that didn't produce immediate results. She assigned me to project after project, each one further removed from my core research interests. I worked on smartphone cases, tablet accessories, and even briefly on a failed attempt at smart home integration. Each assignment taught me valuable lessons about product development, manufacturing constraints, and market demands, but I never lost sight of my primary goal. Everything changed in 2016 when Marcus Chin joined our team. Marcus arrived with impressive credentials, a Stanford MBA, 3 years at Google, and glowing recommendations from his previous supervisors. He was assigned to our department as a product strategy manager, reporting directly to Jennifer but working closely with the entire engineering team. From the moment he walked into our shared workspace, Marcus exuded confidence and charm. He had an easy smile, spoke 3 languages fluently, and possessed an uncanny ability to make everyone feel like the most important person in the room when he was talking to them. Our first collaboration was on a wireless charging project for automotive applications. The automotive industry was just beginning to embrace wireless charging for electric vehicles, and our company had secured a contract with a major manufacturer to develop a prototype system. Marcus handled the business development and market analysis while I led the technical implementation. Working with Marcus was initially refreshing. Unlike many business-focused colleagues who treated engineers as implementers of their grand visions, Marcus genuinely sought to understand the technical challenges we faced. He would spend hours in the lab, asking detailed questions about circuit design, power efficiency, and electromagnetic interference. His questions were intelligent and revealed a deeper understanding of technology than his business background might suggest. During one of our late-night work sessions, I made a casual comment about my graduate research and the theoretical foundations of my wireless energy transmission concept. Marcus's eyes lit up with genuine curiosity, and he peppered me with questions about the practical applications, market potential, and technical hurdles involved. I found myself explaining concepts I had never shared with anyone at the company. Describing the years of research and experimentation that had led to my current theories. Marcus listened intently, taking notes on his laptop and occasionally asking for clarification on technical terms. He seemed genuinely fascinated by the potential implications of the technology, and his enthusiasm was infectious. For the first time since joining the company, I felt like someone truly understood the significance of what I was trying to achieve. Our automotive charging project was a resounding success. The prototype exceeded all performance specifications, and the client was so impressed that they immediately signed a contract for the next phase of development. Marcus's market analysis had been spot on, and his presentation to the client was masterful. He had a gift for translating complex technical concepts into compelling business narratives that resonated with executives and engineers alike. Jennifer Walsh took notice of our successful collaboration and began assigning us to work together on increasingly important projects. Marcus and I developed an effective partnership. I would handle the technical innovation and implementation while he managed the business strategy and client relationships. Our complementary skills made us a formidable team, and our success rate was impressive enough to catch the attention of senior management. By early 2017, both Marcus and I had been promoted. I became a principal engineer with expanded responsibilities for the entire wireless charging product line, while Marcus was elevated to senior product strategy manager with a broader portfolio spanning multiple product categories. We maintained our collaborative relationship, but I began to notice subtle changes in Marcus's behavior. The first red flag appeared during a quarterly review meeting. Marcus was presenting the results of our latest project to the executive team, and in his presentation, he described several technical innovations as our breakthrough approaches and strategic technical decisions we made. While technically accurate, the phrasing subtly obscured the fact that the technical innovations had originated from my research and development efforts. When I mentioned this to Marcus after the meeting, he laughed it off and assured me that everyone knew I was the technical genius behind our success. Despite my growing unease, I continued to share my research and insights with Marcus. I showed him my private laboratory notes, explained the theoretical foundations of my wireless energy transmission concept, and even walked him through the detailed technical specifications I had been developing. Marcus absorbed everything with his characteristic enthusiasm and seemed genuinely appreciative of my willingness to share such sensitive information. Our professional relationship deepened into what I considered a genuine friendship. Marcus often invited me to grab drinks after work, and our conversations ranged from technical discussions to personal stories about our backgrounds and career aspirations. He shared stories about his childhood in California, his struggles to prove himself in the competitive technology industry, and his dreams of eventually starting his own company. I found myself reciprocating with my own stories about growing up in Texas, my immigrant parents' sacrifices to support my education, and my determination to create technology that would make a meaningful difference in people's lives. During one particularly memorable evening at a downtown bar, Marcus asked me directly about my long-term career goals. I confided that while I loved working at Innovate Solutions, my ultimate dream was to see my wireless energy transmission concept become a commercial reality. I explained that I had been working on the patent application in my spare time, refining the technical specifications and conducting additional research to strengthen the foundation of my claims. Marcus listened thoughtfully and then offered what seemed like genuine advice. He suggested that I should be more strategic about positioning my research within the company, perhaps by proposing a formal research and development initiative that would give me the resources and support needed to fully develop the concept. He volunteered to help me prepare a business case presentation that would highlight the commercial potential and market opportunities. Over the following weeks, Marcus and I worked together to develop a comprehensive proposal for my wireless energy transmission project. He contributed valuable market analysis, competitive research, and financial projections that significantly strengthened the business case. His insights into corporate decision-making processes and presentation strategies were invaluable, and I was grateful for his support and guidance. The proposal we created was impressive by any measure. It outlined a 3-year development timeline, detailed technical milestones, projected development costs, and potential revenue streams. Marcus had researched the competitive landscape thoroughly and identified several key market opportunities where our technology could provide significant advantages over existing solutions. The presentation was polished, professional, and compelling. We scheduled a presentation for the executive team in June 2017. I was nervous but confident in the strength of our proposal and the potential of the underlying technology. Marcus assured me that he would handle the business and strategic aspects of the presentation while I focused on the technical explanation and demonstration. The presentation went better than I had dared to hope. The executive team was clearly impressed by both the technical innovation and the business potential. Robert Steinberg himself asked several detailed questions about the technical feasibility and development timeline, and his engagement suggested genuine interest in moving forward with the project. Jennifer Walsh was supportive but raised valid concerns about resource allocation and the potential impact on our existing product development commitments. Marcus addressed her concerns smoothly, proposing a phased approach that would allow us to continue our current projects while gradually building the team and resources needed for the Wireless Energy Transmission Initiative. By the end of the presentation, we had secured preliminary approval to begin a feasibility study phase, with the understanding that full project approval would depend on the results of our initial research and development efforts. I was elated. After years of working on this concept in isolation, I finally had the opportunity to pursue it with full corporate backing. The success of our presentation led to another round of promotions. I was elevated to Director of Advanced Research, with responsibility for leading the Wireless Energy Transmission Project and several other emerging technology initiatives. Marcus was promoted to Director of Strategic Product Development, with oversight of the business development aspects of our most important research projects. Our new positions required us to work even more closely together, and initially, our collaboration seemed to be reaching new heights of effectiveness. Marcus's strategic insights were helping me navigate the complex politics of corporate research and development, while my technical expertise was enabling him to make more informed decisions about product positioning and market entry strategies. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. However, as we began the feasibility study phase of the Wireless Energy Transmission Project, I started to notice more troubling changes in Marcus's behavior. He began scheduling meetings with key stakeholders without including me, claiming that he was handling the preliminary business discussions to avoid wasting my valuable technical time. He started referring to the project as our initiative in emails and presentations, using language that increasingly obscured my role as the primary inventor and technical lead. Most concerning was his growing interest in the detailed technical aspects of my research. Marcus began asking for copies of my laboratory notes, technical specifications, and research documentation, claiming that he needed them to prepare accurate business development materials. While his requests seemed reasonable on the surface, something about his intensity and focus made me uncomfortable. I began to pay closer attention to Marcus's interactions with other team members and noticed a pattern of behavior that troubled me. He had a talent for positioning himself as the primary point of contact between our technical team and senior management, gradually inserting himself into decision-making processes where his input wasn't necessarily required. He was building relationships and accumulating influence in ways that seemed calculated rather than organic. Despite my growing concerns, I continued to work closely with Marcus throughout the latter half of 2017. The feasibility study was progressing well, and we were achieving technical milestones that validated the commercial potential of my wireless energy transmission concept. My team of engineers was making breakthrough discoveries almost weekly, and the patent application I had been working on was becoming increasingly sophisticated and comprehensive. In December 2017, I finally submitted my patent application to the United States Patent and Trademark Office. The application was the culmination of years of research and represented the most detailed and comprehensive documentation of my wireless energy transmission concept. I had worked with a specialized patent attorney to ensure that the application was technically accurate and legally robust, covering not just the core innovation but also the various implementation approaches and potential applications. I informed Marcus about the patent submission during one of our regular project meetings. He congratulated me enthusiastically and seemed genuinely excited about the implications for our project's commercial potential. He asked several questions about the patent process, the timeline for approval, and the scope of protection the patent would provide. What I didn't realize at the time was that Marcus was asking those questions for reasons that had nothing to do with supporting my career or advancing our shared project. Over the following months, I would discover that Marcus had been developing his own agenda, one that involved systematically undermining my position while positioning himself to claim credit for the work we had done together. The first concrete sign of trouble came in February 2018, when I learned that Marcus had been conducting private meetings with Robert Steinberg and other senior executives. Jennifer Walsh mentioned it casually during a department meeting, noting that Marcus seemed to be taking on a more prominent role in strategic planning discussions. When I asked Marcus about these meetings, he explained that he was simply providing updates on our various projects and ensuring that senior management stayed informed about our progress. His explanation seemed reasonable, but something about his demeanor made me suspicious. Marcus had always been open about his meetings and interactions with senior management, but now he seemed evasive when I asked for details about these private discussions. He would change the subject or provide vague, non-specific responses that didn't really answer my questions. Around the same time, I began to notice that Marcus was receiving information about our project that I wasn't being given. He would make references to decisions or changes that I hadn't been informed about, and when I asked for clarification, he would claim that the information had been communicated through executive channels that didn't include me. The situation became more concerning in March 2018, when Marcus announced that he would be taking over the client relationship management for our wireless energy transmission project. He explained that senior management wanted to streamline communication with potential partners and investors, and that his background in business development made him the logical choice to serve as the primary external representative for our initiative. While his explanation made sense from a business perspective, I was troubled by the fact that this decision had been made without consulting me. The wireless energy transmission project was based on my research and innovation, and I had been the primary technical spokesperson since its inception. Being excluded from the decision-making process felt like a significant deviation from our established collaborative relationship. My concerns proved to be well-founded. Over the following weeks, I discovered that Marcus had been presenting our project to potential partners and investors as his own initiative, with my role minimized to that of a technical implementer working under his strategic guidance. He had created presentation materials that portrayed him as the visionary leader of the project, while relegating me to a supporting role focused on technical execution. When I confronted Marcus about these misrepresentations, he dismissed my concerns and claimed that I was being overly sensitive about credit and recognition. He argued that our success as a team was more important than individual recognition, and that my focus should be on advancing the technology rather than worrying about corporate politics. His response revealed a fundamental shift in his attitude toward our collaboration. Marcus, who had once been genuinely supportive and collaborative, had been replaced by someone who seemed to view our partnership as a strategic relationship to be managed rather than a genuine friendship based on mutual respect and shared goals. By April 2018, the warning signs had escalated into a full-blown crisis that would fundamentally alter the trajectory of my career. What began as subtle shifts in Marcus's behavior had transformed into a coordinated campaign to undermine my authority and claim ownership of my life's work. The first major blow came during what should have been a routine quarterly review meeting. I arrived at the conference room expecting to present our latest technical achievements and discuss the upcoming phases of development. Instead, I found myself sitting at the far end of the table while Marcus delivered a comprehensive presentation about his vision for the wireless energy transmission project. The presentation was masterfully crafted, incorporating months of our collaborative work but reframed to position Marcus as the strategic mastermind behind every major decision. He spoke eloquently about market analysis, competitive positioning, and revenue projections, weaving in technical details with a confidence that suggested deep personal involvement in their development. The executives listened intently, occasionally nodding in approval as Marcus outlined his ambitious expansion plans. What struck me most painfully was how seamlessly he had appropriated not just our shared work, but concepts and innovations that I had developed entirely independently. He discussed the theoretical foundations of resonant frequency optimization as if he had personally conducted the graduate-level research. He presented my prototype designs as collaborative efforts where his strategic insights had guided the technical implementation. When Robert Steinberg asked about the technical feasibility of the next development phase, Marcus responded with detailed explanations that demonstrated an intimate familiarity with my private research notes. He referenced specific experimental results that I had shared with him in confidence, presenting them as evidence of our team's breakthrough discoveries. Throughout the presentation, I sat in stunned silence, watching years of my independent research being repackaged and presented as Marcus's intellectual property. The other executives seemed impressed by his command of both technical and business aspects of the project, and I could see their perception of the project's leadership shifting in real time. When Marcus finally invited questions, Jennifer Walsh asked about my role in the upcoming phases. Marcus's response was carefully calibrated to acknowledge my technical contributions while establishing clear hierarchical boundaries. He described me as an exceptional engineer who has been instrumental in implementing our strategic vision, effectively reducing my role from project originator to skilled technician. The meeting concluded with senior management expressing strong support for Marcus's proposed expansion plan and timeline. Robert Steinberg personally congratulated Marcus on his strategic leadership and innovative thinking, while I received polite acknowledgement for my valuable technical contributions. Walking back to my office after the meeting, I felt a combination of rage and disbelief that threatened to overwhelm my professional composure. Marcus fell into step beside me, chatting casually about the positive reception from the executive team as if nothing unusual had occurred. When I finally found my voice and asked him directly about his misrepresentation of my work, his response revealed the calculated nature of his actions. "David, you're thinking about this all wrong," he said with the same charming smile that had once made me feel like we were genuine partners. "Individual credit doesn't matter in corporate environments. What matters is advancing the project and maximizing our collective success. The executives need to see clear leadership and strategic vision, and frankly, that's not your strongest skill set." His words were delivered with such casual confidence that I wondered if he genuinely believed his own rationalization. He continued explaining that my technical expertise was invaluable but that the project needed someone with his business acumen to navigate the complexities of corporate politics and external partnerships. Besides, he added with a slight shrug, "You'll benefit tremendously from the project's success regardless of who gets the public credit. Your technical reputation will be enhanced, and you'll have opportunities to work on even more advanced projects in the future." The conversation left me feeling manipulated and betrayed, but also uncertain about how to respond effectively. Marcus had positioned himself so skillfully that confronting him directly might appear petty or unprofessional to senior management. He had cultivated relationships with key decision-makers while gradually isolating me from strategic discussions and external communications. Over the following weeks, I watched helplessly as Marcus systematically consolidated his control over every aspect of the wireless energy transmission project. He restructured the team reporting hierarchy, positioning himself as the sole point of contact between the engineering team and senior management. Team members who had previously reported directly to me were instructed to route all communications through Marcus's office. The physical manifestation of this power grab became apparent when facilities management informed me that my corner office was being reassigned to accommodate organizational restructuring. Marcus had apparently requested a larger space to better facilitate his expanded responsibilities, and my office was deemed the most suitable location. I was relocated to a smaller interior office without windows, ostensibly temporary but with no defined timeline for reversal. The symbolism was unmistakable. My brass nameplate was removed from the corner office and replaced with one bearing Marcus's name and his new title, Director of Strategic Innovation. The glass walls that had once displayed my team's collaborative work were now adorned with Marcus's strategic planning documents and client presentation materials. More devastating than the loss of physical space was the systematic dismantling of my team relationships. Marcus began conducting individual meetings with each of my engineers, ostensibly to better understand their perspectives and career aspirations. These conversations, which he described as team-building initiatives, were actually sophisticated recruitment efforts designed to shift their loyalty and allegiance. Sarah Kim, one of my most talented engineers, was the first to be swayed by Marcus's influence. During a private conversation, she mentioned that Marcus had offered her the opportunity to lead a new research initiative that would significantly advance her career prospects. The project he described was essentially a continuation of my wireless energy transmission research, but repositioned as a fresh venture under his strategic guidance. "He really understands the bigger picture," Sarah explained, her enthusiasm for the opportunity evident in her voice. "Marcus has connections with investors and potential partners that could transform this technology into a commercial reality much faster than traditional corporate development processes." Within days, 2 more engineers approached me with similar stories. Marcus had individually presented each of them with career advancement opportunities that were tied to his version of the project's future development. He had crafted personalized appeals that spoke to their specific ambitions and concerns, demonstrating a sophisticated understanding of human motivation and organizational dynamics. The erosion of my team's loyalty was particularly painful because these were individuals I had hired, trained, and mentored over several years. I had invested countless hours in their professional development, sharing my knowledge and experience to help them grow as engineers and innovators. Watching them gravitate toward Marcus felt like a betrayal of the trust and mutual respect we had built together. By June 2018, Marcus had effectively taken control of my entire operation. The wireless energy transmission project was being developed under his leadership, my team was reporting to him directly, and I had been marginalized to the role of a consulting engineer with limited decision-making authority. The transformation had been so gradual and skillfully executed that it appeared to be a natural evolution of organizational structure rather than a hostile takeover. The final insult came when Marcus announced the formation of a new division called Advanced Energy Solutions, with himself as the founding director. The division's charter included responsibility for all wireless energy transmission research and development, effectively formalizing his appropriation of my life's work. The announcement was accompanied by a press release that described Marcus as a visionary leader in next-generation energy technology and highlighted his groundbreaking research in electromagnetic field optimization. Reading the press release felt like watching my professional obituary being written while I was still alive. My name was mentioned only in passing, as part of a talented team of engineers working under Marcus's strategic direction. Years of independent Research, innovation, and breakthrough discoveries had been reduced to a footnote in someone else's success story. The psychological impact of this systematic dismantling was devastating. I found myself questioning my own perceptions and wondering if I had somehow misunderstood the nature of my relationship with Marcus. Had our collaboration always been one-sided? Had I been naive to trust him with my most sensitive research and proprietary information? Sleep became elusive as I replayed every conversation, every shared moment, every instance where I had opened my research files and laboratory notes to Marcus's scrutiny. I began to see patterns of manipulation that I had missed in real time, recognizing how skillfully he had extracted information while gradually positioning himself as an equal partner in discoveries that were entirely my own. The isolation was perhaps the most difficult aspect of the situation. Marcus had successfully positioned himself as the legitimate leader of the project, making any complaints from me appear to be the result of professional jealousy or an inability to adapt to organizational change. My attempts to discuss the situation with Jennifer Walsh were met with gentle suggestions that I focus on my technical contributions rather than concerning myself with strategic and business development aspects. Marcus has really stepped up to handle the complex political and financial aspects of this project, Jennifer explained during one of our private conversations. That frees you up to focus on what you do best, the technical innovation and problem solving that made this project possible in the first place. Her words, while well-intentioned, revealed how effectively Marcus had reframed the narrative. The project that had originated from my independent research was now viewed as a collaborative effort where Marcus's business acumen had been essential to its viability. My role as the original inventor and primary technical innovator had been minimized to that of a talented implementer working within someone else's strategic framework. Even more troubling was the discovery that Marcus had been actively working to discredit my version of events. Through carefully orchestrated conversations with colleagues and senior management, he had planted seeds of doubt about my claims to original authorship of the technology. He suggested that my recollections were colored by ego and that the reality of our collaboration was more complex than I was willing to acknowledge. The campaign was subtle but effective. Colleagues who had once viewed me as the unquestioned leader of wireless energy transmission research began to treat me with a mixture of sympathy and skepticism. They seemed to believe that I was struggling to adapt to a more collaborative leadership model and that my complaints about Marcus were symptoms of professional immaturity rather than legitimate grievances. By September 2018, I realized that I was facing a choice that would define the remainder of my career. I could continue fighting a battle that seemed increasingly unwinnable, risking further damage to my professional reputation and relationships. Alternatively, I could accept the new reality and try to rebuild my career within the constraints that Marcus had established. The decision became clearer when I discovered that Marcus was actively working to exclude me from the patent application process for improvements and modifications to the original wireless energy transmission technology. He had engaged his own patent attorney and was developing intellectual property claims that built upon my foundational research but positioned him as the primary inventor of the enhanced applications. This discovery crystallized the true nature of Marcus's strategy. He wasn't content to simply claim credit for my work. He was actively working to establish legal ownership of the technology's future development. If successful, his patent applications would give him control over the commercial applications of my life's work, potentially blocking me from any future involvement in the field I had pioneered. The realization that Marcus was attempting to steal not just my current position but my future career prospects triggered a fundamental shift in my thinking. The betrayal was no longer just personal, it was an existential threat to everything I had worked to achieve. The time for passive resistance and hope for organizational justice had passed. I needed to take decisive action to protect my interests and preserve my ability to continue the work that had defined my professional identity, but as I contemplated my options, I kept returning to one crucial fact that gave me hope: my original patent application was already on file with the USPTO, bearing my name as the sole inventor and containing detailed technical specifications that predated any of Marcus's claims. While he had successfully stolen my desk, my title, and my team, the one thing he couldn't touch was the patent that established my legal ownership of the foundational technology. That patent would become the key to everything that followed. October 2018 marked the beginning of my counteroffensive, though at the time it felt more like a desperate attempt at survival than a strategic campaign. The discovery that Marcus was pursuing his own patent applications had galvanized me into action, but I quickly learned that fighting back against a well-positioned adversary within a corporate structure required careful planning and meticulous documentation. My first step was to secure copies of all relevant documentation that could establish the timeline and authorship of my original research. Working late into the night, I systematically gathered emails, laboratory notes, research files, and correspondence that demonstrated my independent development of wireless energy transmission technology. The process was both methodical and emotionally draining, as each document reminded me of the trust one had placed in Marcus and the naivety that had led to my current predicament. The email trail was particularly revealing. I found dozens of messages where Marcus had asked for clarification on technical concepts, requested copies of my research documentation, and sought explanations of theoretical principles that he later presented as his own insights. The timestamps and content of these communications created an undeniable record of information flowing from me to him, rather than the collaborative exchange he had portrayed to senior management. Even more damaging to Marcus's narrative were the laboratory access logs maintained by the company's security system. The electronic records showed that my research had been conducted during evenings and weekends over a period of several years, long before Marcus had joined the company. His access to the laboratory facilities began only after our collaboration started, and the timing of his visits correlated directly with the technical breakthroughs he had claimed as joint discoveries. Armed with this documentation, I requested a private meeting with Jennifer Walsh to present my case. The conversation took place in her office on a gray Tuesday afternoon, with rain streaking down the windows as I methodically laid out the evidence of Marcus's deception. Jennifer listened attentively, occasionally asking questions for clarification, but her expression remained carefully neutral throughout my presentation. "These are serious allegations, David," she said when I finished. "If what you're saying is accurate, then Marcus has engaged in behavior that violates both professional ethics and potentially corporate intellectual property policies. However, I need you to understand that resolving the situation won't be straightforward." Jennifer explained that Marcus had cultivated strong relationships with senior management and had delivered impressive results in terms of project advancement and external partnerships. His version of events had been accepted as the official narrative, and challenging that narrative would require overwhelming evidence and careful navigation of corporate politics. "The reality is that Marcus has positioned himself very strategically," Jennifer continued. "He's built alliances with key decision-makers, and his presentation of the project's success has enhanced his credibility significantly. Even with the documentation you've shown me, reversing the current perception of events will be challenging." Her words were sobering but not entirely unexpected. I had already recognized that Marcus's systematic approach to undermining my position had been far more sophisticated than I had initially realized. His success wasn't just the result of opportunistic behavior, it reflected a calculated strategy executed over many months. Jennifer agreed to investigate my claims, but she cautioned that the process would likely be lengthy and that the outcome was far from certain. Corporate investigations of this nature required extensive documentation, witness interviews, and careful consideration of legal implications. Throughout the process, I would need to continue my current responsibilities while avoiding any actions that could be perceived as retaliatory or unprofessional. The investigation began quietly in November 2018, with Jennifer conducting discreet interviews with team members and reviewing the documentation I had provided. However, word of the inquiry somehow reached Marcus, and his response was swift and devastating. Within days of learning about the investigation, Marcus scheduled individual meetings with each of the engineers who had previously worked under my supervision. The conversations, which he described as team alignment sessions, were actually sophisticated damage control efforts designed to shape their testimony and perceptions of our historical working relationship. Marcus's approach was masterful in its subtlety. Rather than directly attacking my credibility, he positioned my complaints as the unfortunate result of professional stress and difficulty adapting to organizational change. He expressed sympathy for my situation while subtly reinforcing his version of our collaborative history. "David is going through a tough transition," he told Sarah Kim during one of these conversations. "The shift from individual contributor to team collaborator can be challenging for engineers who are accustomed to working independently. I'm hoping we can support him through this adjustment period while continuing to advance the important work we're all committed to." The message was clear without being explicitly stated. My complaints were symptoms of personal and professional inadequacy rather than legitimate grievances about intellectual property theft. Marcus's ability to reframe the narrative while maintaining a facade of concern and support demonstrated a level of manipulation that I had seriously underestimated. The effectiveness of his campaign became apparent when Jennifer began reporting back on her interviews with team members. While several engineers acknowledged my historical role in developing the technology, their recollections of our collaborative work had been subtly influenced by Marcus's reframing efforts. They described a partnership where Marcus's strategic insights had been instrumental in transforming my theoretical research into practical applications. It seems like there's been a genuine collaboration, Jennifer explained during one of our progress meetings. While your technical contributions are clearly significant, the picture that's emerging suggests a more complex partnership than either your version or Marcus's version fully captures. The investigation's preliminary findings were disappointing, but not entirely surprising. Corporate investigations tend to favor the status quo, especially when challenging the established narrative would require significant organizational disruption. Marcus's strategic positioning and relationship building had created a reality where his version of events was not just accepted but actively defended by those who had benefited from his leadership. Meanwhile, my professional isolation deepened. As word of the investigation spread throughout the department, colleagues who had once sought my technical expertise began to maintain careful distance, apparently concerned about being drawn into what they perceived as a personal conflict between Marcus and me. The collaborative relationships that had once been the foundation of my job satisfaction gradually withered under the weight of corporate politics and social awkwardness. The psychological toll was severe. I found myself second-guessing every interaction, analyzing conversations for hidden meanings, and struggling to maintain focus on technical work while navigating the complex dynamics of the investigation. Sleep became increasingly elusive as I replayed scenarios and prepared for potential confrontations that might never materialize. By December 2018, it became clear that the internal investigation was unlikely to produce the vindication I had hoped for. Jennifer delivered the disappointing news during a private meeting that felt more like a gentle letdown than a definitive resolution. The investigation has revealed some ambiguities in the historical record, she explained carefully. While your technical contributions are undeniable, the evidence doesn't definitively support claims of intellectual property theft or deliberate misrepresentation. The recommendation from senior management is that we focus on moving forward constructively rather than continuing to relitigate past events. The corporate speak was diplomatic but unmistakable. My complaints had been heard, considered, and ultimately dismissed. Marcus's strategic positioning had proven effective, and the organization had chosen to accept his version of reality rather than risk the disruption that would accompany a more thorough reckoning with his behavior. However, the investigation had produced one unexpected benefit. During the process of gathering evidence and documentation, I had discovered that my original patent application was progressing through the USPTO review process more rapidly than anticipated. The patent examiner had requested additional technical specifications and clarifications, but the fundamental claims were being evaluated favorably. More importantly, I learned that Marcus's subsequent patent applications were being scrutinized for potential conflicts with existing intellectual property claims. The patent system's rigorous approach to prior art and original invention was proving to be a more reliable arbiter of truth than corporate politics and relationship management. This discovery sparked a new strategy. While I had failed to convince my employer of Marcus's deception, the legal system's approach to intellectual property rights was based on objective evidence rather than subjective perceptions. The patent documentation, laboratory records, and research timeline that had been insufficient for corporate purposes might prove decisive in a legal context. I began consulting with intellectual property attorneys to understand my options and assess the strength of my position. The initial consultations were encouraging. Several attorneys expressed confidence that my original patent application, combined with the extensive documentation of my research timeline, would provide strong protection against Marcus's attempts to claim ownership of the technology. Patent law is quite clear about original invention and prior art, explained Amanda Foster, a specialist in technology patents whom I eventually retained. Your documentation establishes a clear timeline of independent research and development that predates any collaboration with Mr. Chen. His subsequent applications will need to demonstrate significant innovation beyond your foundational work, which appears unlikely based on the materials you've shown me. Amanda's analysis revealed that Marcus had made a crucial strategic error in his patent applications. In his eagerness to claim ownership of the technology's commercial applications, he had failed to adequately differentiate his contributions from my original research. His patent claims overlapped significantly with my foundational work, creating potential grounds for rejection based on prior art concerns. The patent process also revealed another advantage I possessed: the detailed technical documentation I had maintained throughout my research. Unlike Marcus, whose understanding of the technology was largely derivative, I could provide extensive supporting materials that demonstrated deep technical knowledge and original problem-solving approaches. As 2018 drew to a close, I found myself in a strange position. Professionally, I had been thoroughly outmaneuvered by Marcus's political acumen and strategic relationship building. My position within the company had been marginalized, my team had been redistributed, and my contributions had been minimized. To footnote status, however, legally, I was discovering that I possessed significant advantages that Marcus couldn't easily neutralize. The patent system's emphasis on objective evidence and original invention provided a forum where documentation mattered more than office politics, and where technical expertise carried more weight than strategic positioning. The realization that I still held powerful cards in this high-stakes game provided the first genuine hope I had experienced in months. While Marcus had successfully stolen my desk, my title, and my team, he couldn't retroactively change the dates on my patent application or erase the extensive documentation of my independent research. The patent in my name was about to become the foundation for the most satisfying reversal of fortune I could have imagined. But before that satisfaction could be realized, the situation would get significantly worse, testing my resolve and forcing me to make decisions that would define the rest of my career. January 2019 brought news that initially seemed like the final nail in the coffin of my professional aspirations. Marcus announced that Advanced Energy Solutions had secured a major partnership with Tech Global Industries, one of the largest technology conglomerates in the world. The partnership agreement included a substantial investment in wireless energy transmission research and development, along with exclusive licensing rights for commercial applications. The announcement was accompanied by a press conference where Marcus was introduced as the pioneering inventor of breakthrough wireless energy transmission technology. Watching him field questions from technology journalists and industry analysts, speaking confidently about his years of research and innovative approaches to electromagnetic field optimization, was almost unbearable. Yet even as I watched my life's work being celebrated under someone else's name, I knew that Marcus had just made the biggest mistake of his career. The higher the profile of his claims, the more scrutiny they would receive. And when that scrutiny came, my patent would be waiting. February 2019 delivered the turning point I had been desperately hoping for, though it arrived in a form I hadn't anticipated. The notification from the United States Patent and Trademark Office appeared in my email inbox on a cold Thursday morning, bearing the official seal and formal language that would forever change the balance of power between Marcus and me. Notice of Patent Allowance, Application Serial Number 15/892-347. Read the subject line. My hands trembled slightly as I opened the document and read the examiner's determination that my wireless energy transmission technology met all requirements for patent protection. After nearly 15 months of review, examination, and technical evaluation, the USPTO had formally recognized me as the sole inventor of the foundational technology that Marcus had been claiming as his own creation. The patent approval was comprehensive, covering not just the basic transmission principles but also the specific implementation methods, frequency optimization techniques, and efficiency enhancement approaches that I had developed through years of independent research. The claims were broad enough to encompass virtually any commercial application of wireless energy transmission technology based on resonant frequency principles. Amanda Foster's reaction to the news was immediate and enthusiastic when I called her office that afternoon. "This changes everything, David," she explained with barely contained excitement. "Your patent establishes unassailable legal ownership of the core technology. Any commercial applications that Marcus or Tech Global Industries attempt to develop will require licensing agreements with you as the patent holder." The implications were staggering. Marcus's partnership with Tech Global Industries, the research initiative he had built using my stolen team, and the commercial applications he had been promising to investors were all suddenly dependent on technology that I legally owned. The very success he had achieved by appropriating my work had inadvertently created a massive liability that could potentially destroy his career and cost his corporate partners millions of dollars. However, Amanda cautioned that translating legal ownership into practical advantage would require careful strategic planning. Patent enforcement was a complex and expensive process, and Marcus's corporate backing provided him with significant resources to challenge or circumvent my intellectual property rights. "We need to move quickly and decisively," Amanda advised. "The longer Marcus continues developing commercial applications based on your patented technology, the more entrenched the situation becomes. We should begin with a formal notification of patent infringement, followed by demands for licensing negotiations or cessation of infringing activities." The legal strategy we developed was multifaceted and aggressive. The first phase involved sending formal cease and desist notifications to Marcus, Innovate Solutions, and Tech Global Industries, informing them of my patent rights and demanding immediate cessation of all unauthorized use of my protected technology. The letters were carefully crafted to demonstrate the strength of my legal position while leaving room for negotiated settlements that could avoid prolonged litigation. Simultaneously, we began documenting the scope and scale of the patent infringement. This process required detailed analysis of Marcus's research initiatives, the technical specifications being developed by his team, and the commercial applications being promised to tech global industries. The documentation would be essential for calculating damages and establishing the financial impact of the unauthorized use of my intellectual property. The legal notifications were delivered on March 5, 2019, and the response was swift and dramatic. Within hours of receiving the cease and desist letter, Marcus was on the phone demanding an immediate meeting to discuss what he characterized as this unfortunate misunderstanding about intellectual property rights. His tone during that phone call was a fascinating blend of anger, desperation, and attempted manipulation. Gone was the confident charm that had served him so well in corporate settings, replaced by a strained urgency that revealed how thoroughly the patent approval had disrupted his carefully constructed narrative. "David, we need to talk about this rationally," Marcus insisted, his voice carrying an edge of panic that I had never heard before. "You're putting both of our careers at risk with these legal threats. We can work this out between us without involving lawyers and creating unnecessary complications." I agreed to meet with Marcus, but only in the presence of legal counsel and with clear documentation of any discussions. The meeting was scheduled for the following week at Amanda's law office, providing a neutral venue where Marcus couldn't rely on his corporate influence or relationship-building advantages. The confrontation that took place in Amanda's conference room was unlike any interaction Marcus and I had previously experienced. Stripped of his corporate authority and faced with unassailable legal documentation, Marcus was forced to confront the reality of his situation for the first time since beginning his campaign to appropriate my work. Amanda opened the meeting by methodically reviewing the patent documentation, the timeline of my research, and the evidence of infringement represented by Marcus's current projects. Her presentation was clinical and devastating, systematically dismantling every argument Marcus might make about collaborative development or shared intellectual property rights. "Mr. Chen, the evidence is overwhelming that you have knowingly and deliberately infringed upon my client's patented technology," Amanda stated with professional precision. "Your research initiatives, partnership agreements, and commercial development activities all depend fundamentally on innovations that are legally owned by Dr. Rodriguez." Marcus's response revealed the depth of his miscalculation. Throughout his campaign to steal my work, he had focused exclusively on corporate politics and relationship management while completely overlooking the legal implications of intellectual property theft. His assumption that controlling the corporate narrative would be sufficient to establish ownership had left him vulnerable to exactly the kind of patent enforcement action we were now pursuing. "This is a collaborative technology," Marcus protested, his carefully maintained composure finally cracking under pressure. "David and I developed these applications together. His patent covers only the basic transmission principles, not the commercial implementations we've been working on." Amanda's response was immediate and definitive. She opened my patent documentation to specific claims that covered not just the basic principles but also the implementation methods, optimization techniques, and efficiency enhancements that Marcus had been presenting as his own innovations. The patent's broad scope meant that virtually any practical application of wireless energy transmission based on resonant frequency principles would fall under my intellectual property protection. The meeting concluded with Marcus requesting time to consult with his own legal counsel and consider his options. However, the fundamental reality of the situation was inescapable. He had built his entire professional renaissance on technology that he didn't own and couldn't legally use without my permission. Over the following weeks, the ripple effects of the patent enforcement action spread throughout Innovate Solutions and Tech Global Industries. Legal teams from both companies became involved, conducting their own analysis of the intellectual property issues and assessing the potential financial exposure from continued development of infringing technology. The corporate response was swift and predictable. Tech Global Industries immediately suspended their partnership agreement pending resolution of the intellectual property dispute, effectively freezing the funding and resources that Marcus had been counting on for his advanced energy solutions division. Innovate Solutions launched its own internal investigation to determine how the company had become involved in potential patent infringement activities. Jennifer Walsh requested an urgent meeting to discuss the situation and its implications for ongoing projects. Her demeanor during this conversation was markedly different from our previous discussions about Marcus's behavior. The corporate investigation that had dismissed my complaints about intellectual property theft now seemed inadequate in light of formal patent documentation and legal enforcement actions. "David, I need you to help me understand how we got into this situation," Jennifer said, her expression reflecting genuine concern about the company's potential liability. "The legal notifications we've received suggest that our entire wireless energy transmission program may be based on your patented technology. How did Marcus gain access to this intellectual property, and what are our options for resolving this issue?" I explained the history of my relationship with Marcus, the gradual sharing of research information that had occurred during our collaboration, and the systematic way he had appropriated my independent work while positioning himself as the project's strategic leader. Jennifer listened with growing alarm as she realized the scope of the intellectual property issues and the company's potential exposure to damages and licensing fees. The corporate legal team's analysis confirmed what Amanda had already established. My patent provided comprehensive protection for the technology underlying the entire wireless energy transmission program. Any continued development or commercial application would require licensing agreements that I had no obligation to provide on terms favorable to the company. Meanwhile, Marcus's position within the organization was rapidly deteriorating. The partnership suspension had eliminated the external validation that had supported his claims to strategic leadership, while the patent enforcement action had exposed the fundamental weakness of his intellectual property position. Senior management began distancing themselves from both Marcus and the Advanced Energy Solutions division as they assessed the potential financial and reputational risks. The psychological impact on Marcus was evident during our few remaining professional interactions. The confident charm that had been his primary weapon was replaced by a defensive hostility that alienated the very colleagues who had previously supported his initiatives. His attempts to challenge my patent claims only served to highlight his superficial understanding of the technology he had been claiming as his own creation. By April 2019, the situation had evolved into formal settlement negotiations mediated by corporate legal teams and intellectual property specialists. The discussions were complex and contentious, involving not just licensing terms but also damages for past infringement, attribution of credit for the technology's development, and restructuring of existing research initiatives. Tech Global Industries' position was particularly interesting. Their legal team had conducted an independent analysis of my patent and concluded that the technology represented genuine innovation with significant commercial potential. Rather than viewing the patent enforcement as an obstacle, they began exploring the possibility of licensing agreements that would provide them with legitimate access to the technology while ensuring appropriate compensation for my intellectual property rights. "Your patent is actually quite valuable," explained Michael Harrison, Tech Global's chief intellectual property counsel, during one of the settlement conferences. "Our technical analysis suggests that this technology could revolutionize several major market segments. We're interested in discussing licensing terms that would allow us to proceed with commercial development while ensuring fair compensation for your innovations." The irony was delicious. Marcus's partnership with Tech Global Industries, which had been intended to validate his appropriation of my work, was instead creating opportunities for legitimate collaboration based on proper recognition of my intellectual property rights. The very success he had achieved through deception was now being transformed into success that would benefit me directly. Settlement negotiations continued through the spring of 2019, with multiple parties working to develop agreements that would resolve the intellectual property disputes while allowing commercial development to proceed. The process was complicated by Marcus's attempts to salvage some portion of his claims to the technology, but his lack of supporting documentation and weak legal position made meaningful concessions unlikely. The most satisfying aspect of the settlement discussions was watching Marcus confront the reality that his entire professional position had been built on stolen intellectual property. His Advanced Energy Solutions division was being dismantled, his team was being redistributed, and his claims to innovation were being systematically debunked by patent documentation and legal analysis. During one particularly tense negotiation session, Marcus made a final desperate attempt to reframe the situation as a misunderstanding about collaborative research rather than deliberate intellectual property theft. His argument was immediately contradicted by the email records, laboratory access logs, and timeline documentation that Amanda had compiled as evidence of my independent development of the technology. "Mr. Chen, the evidence is overwhelming that Dr. Rodriguez developed this technology independently over a period of several years before your collaboration began," Amanda stated with finality. "Your access to the research was provided through professional courtesy and trust, which you exploited to appropriate intellectual property that was never shared with collaborative intent." The settlement agreement that was finally reached in June 2019 represented a complete vindication of my position and a total reversal of the power dynamic that Marcus had so carefully constructed. The terms included formal recognition of my sole ownership of the wireless energy transmission technology, substantial licensing fees for any commercial applications, and restructuring of research initiatives to properly acknowledge my intellectual property rights. Marcus's role in the restructured organization was minimal and face-saving, essentially reducing him to a business development position with no technical authority or strategic leadership responsibilities. His Advanced Energy Solutions division was disbanded, with the research assets and personnel being reassigned to a new unit under my direction. The financial terms of the settlement were confidential, but they were sufficient to provide me with complete economic security and the resources needed to pursue advanced research without corporate constraints. More importantly, the agreement established clear attribution of credit for the technology and ensured that my role as the original inventor would be properly acknowledged in all future publications, presentations, and commercial applications. Perhaps most satisfying was the requirement that Marcus personally acknowledge his misrepresentation of the technology's authorship and publicly correct the record regarding my role as the original inventor. Watching him deliver a prepared statement to the company's executive team, formally retracting his claims and acknowledging my intellectual property rights, provided a sense of justice that corporate politics had been unable to deliver. The reversal was complete. Marcus had taken my desk, my title, and my team, but he couldn't touch the patent in my name. And that patent had become the instrument of his professional destruction and my ultimate vindication. The months following the settlement brought revelations that extended far beyond my personal vindication. As news of the patent enforcement spread through the technology industry, I began receiving calls from engineers, inventors, and researchers who had experienced similar betrayals. Their stories revealed a disturbing pattern of intellectual property theft that was far more widespread than I had ever imagined. Dr. Elena Vasquez from Austin contacted me in September 2019 after reading about my case in IEE Spectrum magazine. Her experience with a former business partner mirrored my own situation with Marcus, but without the protection of patent documentation. I developed a revolutionary battery management system during my doctoral research, she explained during our video call. My business partner gradually convinced investors that he was the technical visionary behind the innovation. By the time I realized what was happening, he had secured funding and formed a company around my work. Without patents, I had no legal recourse. Elena's story was one of dozens I heard over the following year. A software engineer in Seattle whose machine learning algorithms were appropriated by his manager. A biotechnology researcher in Boston, whose genetic sequencing innovations were claimed by her department head. A materials scientist in California whose carbon nanotube manufacturing process was stolen by a visiting researcher who later filed competing patent applications. Each conversation reinforced the lesson that had emerged from my own experience. Innovation without legal protection was vulnerable to appropriation by individuals who understood how to manipulate corporate structures and personal relationships. The technical brilliance that created breakthrough technologies meant nothing if it could be claimed by others through political maneuvering and strategic deception. These discussions inspired me to establish the Inventors Protection Initiative as part of Rodriguez Advanced Energy Technologies. The program provided pro bono legal assistance to independent researchers and early career engineers who were developing innovative technologies but lacked the resources or knowledge to pursue adequate intellectual property protection. Working with Amanda Foster's law firm, we created educational workshops that taught researchers about patent application processes, documentation requirements, and strategies for protecting intellectual property in collaborative environments. The workshops filled auditoriums at universities and technology conferences, reflecting a hunger for practical knowledge about navigating the complex intersection of innovation and legal protection. The initiative's first major case involved defending a graduate student at Carnegie Mellon whose advisor was attempting to claim ownership of breakthrough artificial intelligence algorithms. The situation bore striking similarities to my experience with Marcus, a trusted mentor gradually appropriating innovative work while positioning themselves as the primary contributor to the research. The legal victory in that case established important precedents about student intellectual property rights and advisor relationships. More importantly, it demonstrated that the protection strategies we had developed could be applied effectively across different industries and institutional contexts. By early 2020, Rodriguez Advanced Energy Technologies had grown into a multifaceted organization with 3 distinct divisions. The research division continued advancing wireless energy transmission technology and exploring adjacent innovations in electromagnetic field manipulation. The intellectual property division managed our growing portfolio of patents and licensing agreements. The advocacy division operated the Inventors Protection Initiative and provided consulting services to other technology companies dealing with intellectual property disputes. The financial success of our licensing programs had exceeded all projections. Tech Global Industries alone was paying over $8 million annually for rights to our core wireless transmission patents, while secondary licensing agreements with automotive manufacturers, consumer electronics companies, and industrial automation firms generated additional millions in revenue. This financial foundation allowed us to pursue research directions that might not have been viable in traditional corporate environments. We invested heavily in experimental technologies like wireless power transmission over kilometer distances, electromagnetic field manipulation for manufacturing applications, and integration of wireless charging with renewable energy systems. The freedom to pursue pure research without quarterly profit pressures or corporate strategic constraints was intoxicating. Our laboratory became a playground for exploring the most ambitious applications of electromagnetic field theory, limited only by physics principles rather than business considerations. One breakthrough that emerged from this unrestricted research environment was a wireless power distribution system capable of charging multiple devices simultaneously within a 30-meter radius. The technology used adaptive frequency modulation to optimize power delivery for different devices while maintaining efficiency levels above 95%. The commercial implications were staggering. Imagine office buildings where every electronic device was automatically powered without cables or charging stations. Manufacturing facilities where robotic systems operated continuously without battery limitations. Electric vehicle charging networks that could power cars while they drove on specially equipped highways. These applications required fundamental advances in electromagnetic field control that went far beyond my original patent claims. However, they built upon the foundational principles I had established, creating opportunities for additional patent applications that would extend our intellectual property protection for decades into the future. The contrast with Marcus's trajectory during this same period was stark and increasingly dramatic. Industry contacts informed me that he had struggled to find employment after the intellectual property settlement became public knowledge. Technology. Companies conducting background checks discovered not just the patent infringement issues but also the broader pattern of misrepresentation that had characterized his professional behavior. His attempts to rebrand himself in adjacent industries were hampered by the digital permanence of the legal settlement and media coverage of our dispute. Online searches for his name inevitably returned articles about intellectual property theft and professional misconduct, making it virtually impossible for him to escape the consequences of his actions. A former colleague mentioned seeing Marcus at a technology conference in Las Vegas, working as a sales representative for a third-tier electronics distributor. The transformation from strategic director of a major research initiative to mid-level sales associate illustrated the complete collapse of a career built on appropriated innovations and deceptive practices. The psychological impact of witnessing this reversal was complex. While I felt justified satisfaction at seeing appropriate consequences for his betrayal, I also experienced moments of regret about the human cost of the legal enforcement action. Marcus had possessed genuine talents in business development and strategic planning that could have contributed positively to technology advancement if applied ethically. However, any sympathy was tempered by the realization that his actions had extended far beyond personal betrayal. The theft of intellectual property, the manipulation of corporate resources, and the deception of investors and partners represented serious ethical violations that demanded accountability. The patent enforcement action had protected not just my interests but also the integrity of innovation and intellectual property rights more broadly. The media attention surrounding our case had attracted interest from documentary filmmakers and business journalists exploring themes of corporate betrayal and intellectual property protection. A Harvard Business School case study based on our experience became required reading in their entrepreneurship and intellectual property courses. These educational applications pleased me more than the commercial success or personal vindication. If our story could help future innovators avoid similar betrayals or inspire them to pursue adequate legal protection for their work, then the painful experience with Marcus would have generated lasting positive value. The speaking engagements that resulted from this media attention provided platforms for discussing broader issues about innovation, collaboration, and intellectual property protection in technology industries. Audiences consistently responded with enthusiasm to practical advice about patent applications, documentation requirements, and strategies for protecting intellectual property in collaborative environments. One presentation at MIT's annual Innovation Conference generated particularly meaningful feedback. A graduate student approached me afterward to describe how my story had inspired her to file patent applications for biotechnology innovations she had been developing in her advisor's laboratory. "I was planning to wait until after graduation to pursue patents," she explained. "But hearing about your experience convinced me that waiting could be dangerous. I filed provisional applications last month and I'm working with the Technology Transfer Office to ensure proper documentation of my independent research." Her proactive approach to intellectual property protection represented exactly the kind of behavioral change I hoped our story would inspire. Too many brilliant researchers had learned about patent protection only after experiencing betrayal or appropriation of their work. The expansion of Rodriguez Advanced Energy Technologies continued throughout 2020 and 2021, driven by breakthrough applications and strategic partnerships that had emerged from our research initiatives. We established satellite laboratories in Austin, Boston, and San Francisco, each focusing on different aspects of electromagnetic field manipulation and wireless energy transmission. The Austin laboratory specialized in automotive applications, working directly with major manufacturers to integrate wireless charging systems into electric vehicle platforms. The Boston facility focused on medical device applications, exploring how wireless power transmission could eliminate battery limitations in implantable devices and portable medical equipment. The San Francisco laboratory concentrated on consumer electronics and smart home integration. Each facility operated with the same principles of intellectual property protection and innovation documentation that had protected my original research. Every researcher signed comprehensive agreements acknowledging the company's ownership of work-related innovations while preserving their rights to independent research conducted outside their employment responsibilities. The legal framework we developed became a model for other technology companies seeking to balance collaborative innovation with intellectual property protection. Amanda Foster's law firm began offering consulting services to help organizations implement similar structures, spreading the lessons learned from our experience throughout the technology industry. By 2022, Rodriguez Advanced Energy Technologies held 47 patents related to electromagnetic field manipulation and wireless energy transmission. Our licensing revenues exceeded $30 million annually, while our research initiatives continued producing breakthrough innovations at an accelerating pace. The company's valuation, according to independent assessments conducted for potential investment partnerships, had reached over $200 million. The intellectual property portfolio that had begun with a single patent application in 2017 had grown into one of the most valuable collections of electromagnetic technology patents in the world. This success attracted acquisition interest from major technology corporations, venture capital firms, and government research agencies. However, the independence and research freedom that had made our breakthroughs possible were too valuable to sacrifice for short-term financial gains. Instead, we pursued strategic partnerships that provided access to additional resources and markets while preserving our autonomy and intellectual property rights. These partnerships allowed us to accelerate commercial applications while maintaining control over research directions and innovation priorities. The most significant partnership was announced in late 2022 with the Department of Energy's Advanced Research Projects Agency. The collaboration involved developing wireless power transmission systems for renewable energy distribution, with potential applications ranging from solar panel networks to offshore wind farms. The government partnership validated our technologies' strategic importance while providing funding for research directions that aligned with national energy security priorities. The relationship also offered access to specialized testing facilities and regulatory expertise that would accelerate the development of large-scale commercial applications. As I reflected on the journey from corporate employee to successful entrepreneur, the role of intellectual property protection remained the central theme. Every milestone in our company's growth could be traced back to the decision to file patent applications for my original wireless energy transmission research. Without that patent protection, Marcus's appropriation of my work would have been complete and irreversible. Corporate politics and relationship management would have determined the allocation of credit and ownership, leaving me with no recourse when faced with systematic deception and manipulation. The patent system, despite its complexities and limitations, had provided objective standards for evaluating original invention and creative ownership. The legal documentation requirements had forced me to maintain detailed records of my research timeline and technical development process, creating evidence that could withstand scrutiny from patent examiners, corporate legal teams, and federal courts. This experience had transformed my understanding of innovation from a purely technical challenge to a multidisciplinary endeavor requiring legal strategy, business planning, and political awareness. The most brilliant technological breakthrough meant nothing if it could be appropriated by individuals who better understood corporate dynamics and intellectual property vulnerabilities. The lessons extended beyond individual protection to broader questions about innovation ecosystems and collaborative research environments. How could organizations foster genuine collaboration while preventing the appropriation of individual contributions? How could academic institutions protect student research while encouraging mentor relationships? How could corporations balance knowledge sharing with intellectual property security? These questions had no simple answers, but our experience suggested that formal legal protection was essential regardless of trust relationships or collaborative intentions. Patents, copyrights, and trade secret agreements provided objective frameworks for defining ownership and preventing appropriation, Even in environments where personal relationships appeared to be based on mutual respect and shared goals, the establishment of the Inventors Protection Initiative had grown beyond pro bono legal assistance to include policy advocacy for intellectual property reform. We worked with congressional committees to develop legislation strengthening protections for individual inventors and researchers, particularly in academic and corporate collaborative environments. The policy work brought me into contact with other inventors and entrepreneurs who had experienced similar betrayals and appropriations. Their stories reinforced the systemic nature of intellectual property theft and the need for stronger legal protections and enforcement mechanisms. Dr. Michael Torres from Stanford described how his breakthrough materials research had been appropriated by a department colleague who filed competing patent applications based on information shared during research collaboration meetings. The legal battle had lasted 3 years and cost over $2 million before his original invention was finally recognized. Jennifer Walsh, my former supervisor, had become an advocate for intellectual property protection after witnessing the Marcus situation unfold. She implemented new policies at Innovate Solutions requiring formal documentation of individual contributions to collaborative research projects and mandatory intellectual property training for all technical staff. Your case opened our eyes to vulnerabilities we hadn't recognized, Jennifer explained during a policy conference where we both spoke about corporate intellectual property protection. We realized that our collaborative culture, while valuable for innovation, created opportunities for appropriation that we hadn't adequately addressed through formal protections. The changes at Innovate Solutions became a model for other corporations seeking to balance collaboration with intellectual property security. The policies developed there were adopted by dozens of technology companies and became standard practice recommendations from intellectual property professional organizations. AS Rodriguez Advanced Energy Technologies approached its 5th anniversary. The contrast with Marcus's current situation remained stark and increasingly irreversible. Recent information suggested that he had left the technology industry entirely, working as a regional sales manager for a medical device distributor in Phoenix. The career trajectory that had once seemed so promising had been permanently derailed by the revelation of intellectual property theft and professional deception. His name had been removed from industry publications, conference presenter lists, and professional association memberships. The digital footprint of his technology career had been systematically erased or corrected to reflect accurate attribution of the work he had appropriated. The finality of this professional destruction served as a powerful deterrent to others who might consider similar appropriation strategies. The technology industry's interconnectedness and digital permanence made it impossible to escape the consequences of intellectual property theft once those consequences became part of the public record. Meanwhile, my name had become associated with breakthrough innovations in wireless energy transmission and advocacy for inventor protection rights. Speaking invitations, research collaborations, and business partnerships reflected recognition not just for technical achievements but also for principled leadership in intellectual property protection. The transformation from victim of appropriation to successful entrepreneur and advocate had taken less than 5 years. But the impact would extend for decades through the technologies we developed, the inventors we protected, and the policies we helped establish. The patent in my name had indeed proven untouchable. More than that, it had become the foundation for building something far greater than anything Marcus could have imagined when he first decided to steal my life's work. His betrayal had inadvertently created the catalyst for achievements that would have been impossible within traditional corporate constraints. The desk, the title, and the team had been temporary corporate assignments that could be redistributed through political maneuvering and relationship manipulation. But the patent represented permanent legal recognition of the original invention, protected by federal law and international treaties that no amount of charm or strategic positioning could circumvent. In the end, Marcus had taught me the most valuable lesson of my professional life. Innovation without legal protection is vulnerable to appropriation, but innovation with proper intellectual property protection becomes the foundation for enduring success and lasting impact. He couldn't touch the patent in my name, and that patent had become the key to everything that followed. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.